Hello, everyone. There's a phrase that echoes with quiet strength. Never complain, never explain. It's more than just a motto. It's a way of carrying oneself with grace, confidence, and self-possession. What does it truly mean? It means that not every wound needs to be shared. Not every criticism deserves a response. And not every action requires a defense. In a world that often encourages oversharing and overreacting, this principle stands like a fortress of composure. To never complain is not to deny difficulty. It is to rise above it. Complaining invites pity, not progress. When we refuse to dwell on our misfortunes publicly, we quietly claim strength. It's a form of self-respect. It says, yes, I've been through challenges, but I won't let them define me or become a spectacle. To never explain does not mean being evasive or dishonest. It means trusting your actions to speak for themselves. Over-explaining can dilute our message or expose our insecurities. When we constantly justify ourselves, we hand over our power, seeking approval when we should be grounded in principle. Think of the people you respect the most. They don't shout their truths. They live them. They let their results, their discipline, their integrity speak louder than their words. In today's world of instant opinions, tweets, and comments, silence can feel unnatural, but it is often the most commanding response. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't owe everyone a piece of your mind. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. But let's be clear, this isn't about being cold or closed off. It's about discernment. It's knowing when to speak with clarity and when to rise above noise. It's not silence born of fear, but of control. Never complain. Never explain is not about pride. It's about choosing dignity over drama, resilience over reaction, and principle over performance. So when the pressure builds and the world demands a response, remember, your calm is louder than chaos. Your silence can be your strength. Let us begin by understanding the heart of this phrase. Never complain, never explain. On the surface, it may sound austere, even cold, but beneath it lies a deep philosophy about strength, dignity, and restraint. The origin of this phrase is often traced back to figures in public life and leadership, those who had much to endure and little room to falter in public. It was a guiding principle for those who understood the weight of reputation, the value of privacy, and the cost of vulnerability in the public eye. While the exact source may be debated, the spirit of the phrase has remained consistent through history. A quiet refusal to be defined by criticism or circumstance. To never complain is not about denying reality or pretending everything is perfect. It is a disciplined choice, a refusal to let hardship control the narrative of your life. Complaining can be a way of giving our power away. It turns the focus outward, toward blame, toward helplessness, rather than inward, toward strength and responsibility. When we complain, we place ourselves in the position of a victim. But when we withhold that complaint, we take ownership of our response, even if we didn't choose the problem. And to never explain, that doesn't mean being mysterious for the sake of it, nor does it mean hiding the truth. It means recognizing that explanation, when overused, can actually weaken your message. Suggests that you're uncertain, that you feel the need to prove or defend your choices. The more we explain, the less we're believed. It becomes a cycle of justification that gives others power over how we see ourselves. There's a kind of quiet authority in simply standing by your actions, allowing them to speak for themselves. It's a way of saying, I know who I am. I don't need to convince you. This phrase, the never complain, never explain, is about composure. It is about self-trust. It is about understanding that not every reaction needs to be public. Not every feeling needs to be broadcast, and not every judgment deserves a rebuttal. It is a way of conserving your energy for what truly matters, acting with integrity, not performing for approval. In this age of constant commentary, of instant posts and opinions, this idea may seem old-fashioned, but perhaps that's why it feels so powerful. It calls us back to a quieter kind of confidence, one that does not chase validation, one that does not depend on applause. Let's go deeper. Let us now consider a truth that often gets overlooked in our noisy world. There's tremendous strength in silence. We are conditioned to think of strength as loud through protests, arguments, rebuttals, and assertive declarations. But not all strength makes a sound. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't feel the need to speak. Silence is not weakness. In fact, it requires more discipline to remain silent in the face of provocation than it does to react. It is easy to lash out when we are misunderstood, to retaliate when we are criticized, or to defend ourselves when we are doubted. But it takes great self-control to pause, breathe, and choose not to engage in every confrontation. Silence is a signal. It tells the world, I do not need to respond to everything to prove my worth. It demonstrates that you are not easily rattled, that your sense of identity is rooted deeply enough that someone else's noise cannot shake it. When others shout to be heard, silence often commands more attention. It forces people to lean in, to reflect, to question. That is the subtle power it carries. Think of how silence operates in nature. The stillness before a storm, the quiet of a mountain, the calm of a deep river. These are not passive silences. They are strong, alive, and commanding. Human silence, too, can carry that same intensity. It speaks to confidence, to inner security, to the refusal to be dragged into chaos. And in personal matters, whether it's criticism from a colleague, betrayal from a friend, or gossip from those who don't know the full story, sometimes the greatest show of strength is to say nothing at all. Not because you don't have something to say, but because you know it wouldn't change the hearts of those already committed to misunderstanding you. There is also wisdom in understanding the timing of silence. Not all silence is surrender. Sometimes it is strategy. Sometimes it is preservation. When we are silent, we conserve energy that would otherwise be wasted on noise. We remain clear-headed, focused, and composed while others unravel. And let's not forget, silence gives room for truth to reveal itself on its own. When you remain quiet in the storm, it often passes more quickly. Your silence can expose the shallowness of lies, the weakness of baseless attacks, and the emptiness of drama. While others are busy shouting over one another, your stillness becomes its own voice, a voice that says, I am unshaken. I am enough without explanation. I stand firm. Now let's explore one of the most personal and empowering aspects of this principle: preserving self-respect. In life, we will all encounter moments that test us. We will face unfair treatment, be misunderstood, misrepresented, even mistreated by those who may never fully know us. And in those moments, the temptation is strong to speak out, not necessarily to correct a fact, but to defend our pride, to complain, to explain, to demand that others see our side. But what we often lose in that moment, without even realizing it, is a small piece of our self-respect. You see, when we allow others to dictate when and how we respond, we hand over a subtle kind of power. We let their noise control our voice. We tie our sense of worth to their ability to understand us, approve of us, or agree with us. And when that approval doesn't come, we feel shaken. But when we choose not to complain, when we decide that our dignity is more valuable than a temporary sense of satisfaction from being right, we begin to preserve something far more lasting: our self-respect. Self-respect doesn't come from how loudly we speak. It comes from how confidently we carry ourselves when we choose not to speak. It is the quiet understanding that you don't need validation to know your value. It's the strength to walk away from conflict, not because you're afraid to fight, but because the battle itself is beneath you. When we complain, we often shift the focus from strength to struggle. And while it's human to express pain, when we do it repeatedly, especially to an audience that cannot or will not help, it diminishes us. We become known not for how we rose, but for how we suffered. Self-respect is preserved when we rise without announcement, endure without broadcasting, and grow without needing applause. It is preserved when we acknowledge our private battles, but don't parade them. When we accept unfairness without bitterness, respond with maturity rather than emotion. This doesn't mean we should suppress our feelings or pretend to be unaffected. No, it means we must be wise enough to choose where we place our energy and who we allow to witness our vulnerability. Not everyone is worthy of your truth. Not every situation deserves your explanation. And not every injustice requires a response. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is simply to stay silent, rise with grace, and let your growth speak louder than your grievance. Now we turn to another powerful layer of this principle, avoiding the trap of justification. Let's be honest, justifying ourselves can feel satisfying. Feels like we're setting the record straight, defending our name, clarifying our choices. And sometimes that may be necessary. But when we begin to justify ourselves too often, too quickly, or to the wrong audience, we enter dangerous territory, not just socially, but emotionally and psychologically. Why? Because the moment you begin to over-explain your actions, your words, your character, you unknowingly begin to place your identity in the hands of others. You send a message, not just to them, but to yourself, that their opinion has more authority over your life than your own judgment does. Justification can become a habit, a cycle, a trap, and it rarely ends where we want it to. Once you start defending yourself, you invite more questioning, more assumptions, more criticism. It becomes a never-ending spiral where your silence is mistaken for guilt, but your explanation is taken as weakness. Either way, your energy is drained, your confidence chipped, and your focus diverted. Here's the truth. Not everyone deserves a reason for your choices. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your story. And not everyone is asking for an explanation in good faith. Some people ask why not to understand you, but to judge you. Some people question not out of curiosity, but out of control. And the more you respond, the more you feed the fire of their doubt. Justifying your every move means you are constantly reacting rather than leading. Means your self-worth becomes transactional, based on how convincing you are, how accepted you are, how well your logic aligns with someone else's values. But your life is not a courtroom. You are not on trial every time you make a decision that others don't understand. Choosing not to explain everything is not arrogance. It is clarity. It is knowing that the truth remains true whether or not it is spoken aloud. It is standing firmly in your own awareness, knowing that integrity needs no audience. In fact, when your character is rooted in truth, you can let time be your defense. You can let your consistency prove what your words do not have to. We must also recognize that not explaining ourselves does not mean we are above accountability. It means we are selective about when and where we show it. It means we have the wisdom to know the difference between those who want clarity and those who simply want control. And we no longer feel the need to perform for either. There is great relief in stepping away from the exhausting need to be understood by everyone. There is freedom in knowing that not everyone's misunderstanding is your responsibility to correct. And there is power in realizing that the people who matter, the people whose voices truly carry weight in your life, don't need explanations to believe in you. Now let's bring this principle, never complain, never explain, into the world we live in today, a world vastly different from the one in which this phrase first gained power. Let's talk about its modern relevance and why, perhaps more than ever, this mindset is urgently needed in the age of constant connection, commentary, and comparison. We live in a time where everything is broadcasted. Social media platforms encourage us to share our thoughts, our struggles, our meals, our mistakes, even our moments of weakness. There's this pressure to narrate every experience, to justify every decision, to provide explanations for choices that should belong only to us. We've grown used to defending our lifestyle, our beliefs, our silence, our noise, our happiness, even our sadness, to total strangers, often in real time. And the result? Exhaustion, emotional burnout, a constant state of surveillance and performance, where the lines between real life and public image blur into a space where privacy feels almost rebellious. We explain ourselves not because we want to, but because we feel we must. We apologize for things that aren't wrong. We complain about things we could resolve. We narrate our pain instead of healing from it. We open our wounds not to be stitched, but to be seen. In this cultural climate, choosing to say less is a radical act. Choosing to withhold your complaints in a world built on outrage and oversharing is a form of quiet rebellion. Choosing not to explain your life to people scrolling through it from behind a screen is a powerful reclaiming of your autonomy. You are not obligated to make your private battles public. You do not owe a press release for every decision you make. In the workplace, this principle is just as relevant. How often do we feel the need to defend ourselves in professional settings? To explain why we were late, why we declined a meeting, why we need time off. There is a difference between being accountable and being constantly available for interrogation. Carrying yourself with confidence means trusting that your professionalism, your record, and your integrity will speak louder than your words. The person who doesn't over-explain often commands more respect, not because they're distant, but because they're composed. And then there's personal relationships, friendships, family, romantic partners, the pressure to explain why we feel what we feel, why we need space, why we set boundaries. But real connection doesn't demand constant justification. It doesn't interrogate, it understands. And if it doesn't understand, it doesn't weaponize confusion against you. In our closest relationships, the principle of a never complain, never explain is not about building walls. It's about building mutual respect. It's about saying, I trust you to know me well enough that I don't have to perform my pain or prove my intentions. Even beyond people, this mindset is modern armor against algorithms. When algorithms reward outrage, vulnerability, or controversy, not necessarily authenticity, protecting your peace becomes an act of strength. Not everything needs to be tweeted, posted, shared, or filmed. Some things are sacred simply because they are yours alone. In a world constantly asking for more of you, choosing to say less, retreat. It's wisdom. In an era obsessed with optics, mystery can be more powerful than transparency. And in a society where oversharing is currency, silence can be the most valuable thing you keep. Now we come to a critical nuance in this philosophy: balance and wisdom. Because while the principle of never complain, never explain carries great strength, it must be applied with care, with discernment, and with an understanding of context. Let's be clear, silence is powerful, but silence is not always right. There are moments when silence is strength, and moments when silence is surrender. There are times when explaining ourselves would weaken our position, and times when it would actually build understanding, heal wounds, and foster connection. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. This is where balance becomes essential. We must resist the temptation to treat this phrase as a rigid rule for every situation. Instead, we must see it as a lens, a way to filter the moment, the audience, and the intention behind our speech. If someone we love is confused or hurt by our actions, silence may feel powerful, but it can also be damaging. In that space, an honest explanation is not weakness, it's compassion. A thoughtful conversation, freed from defensiveness, may be exactly what protects the relationship and deepens the trust. Likewise, there are situations, especially in positions of leadership, where not explaining might be misread as aloofness, detachment, or arrogance. Good leaders know when to stay silent to maintain authority, but also when to speak to offer clarity, unity, and direction. Injustice, too, must be spoken against. When silence enables harm or allows falsehoods to grow, it becomes complicity. Silence in those moments must give way to courage. So the question is not simply, should I explain or not? It is, what does this moment require of me? Does it call for dignity in silence or integrity in expression? Balance is also about managing internal pressure, the urge to speak, to defend, to share something just to feel seen. Not every discomfort is a cue to speak, but not every silence is strength either. We must be aware of our motives. Are we staying silent because we are confident or because we are afraid? Are we choosing not to explain because the truth speaks for itself or because we don't want to confront it? This philosophy at its best is not about suppressing emotion or shutting down dialogue. It's about emotional discipline. It's about choosing our words, our complaints, and our explanations with precision, not offering them freely to people or situations that haven't earned them. It's about recognizing that sometimes growth is quiet. That often, the strongest answers are not verbal. They're lived. Wisdom is knowing when silence speaks volumes and when your voice is the bridge to understanding. Wisdom is knowing which battles to fight, which misunderstandings to let go, and which truths are too sacred to explain. So, as we reflect on this timeless principle, never complain, never explain. Let us not see it as a wall that keeps others out, but as a shield that protects what is most valuable within. Our peace, our focus, and our self-respect. In a world that constantly asks for more of our voice, our opinions, our emotions, let us choose to be deliberate. Let us choose to speak only when it serves clarity, not chaos. Let us choose to explain when it builds connection, not when it becomes a performance. And above all, let us remember that our silence, our restraint, and our calm in the storm are not signs of indifference. They are signs of strength. Speak when it matters. Stay silent when it's wise. And walk through the world not with the need to be understood, but with the confidence of someone who already understands themselves. Thank you.